Alright, if you remember for slope, m is the slope when we talk about y equals mx plus b, and we'll talk about that more in just a second. Slope is always the m. And for me, I had to figure out why slope was m, because to me slope should be s, because it's slope, right? What I finally figured out is that the m stands for the movement from one point to another. When we start graphing these, we're going to do the y equals mx plus b form to start with. We always talk about, finding the slope and finding the b value. Well, to me, it finally made sense when I figured out that, okay, slope is m because that's how you move from one point to another. And I'm hoping that they didn't call slope s, because for a lot of people, and me included, my s's look a lot like 5s because I get a little bit lazy with how to write them. All right, hopefully you remember when you're doing these that slope was always rise over run. It's the change in y over the change in x when you talk about those. And there's one formula that you always wind up using. I'm going to put a little twist on it, because that's the one formula that you always saw: y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. The logical math part of me started doing this, and I kind of like this formula a little bit better. Putting the first thing first and the second thing second on the top and the bottom. So y1 minus y2 and x1 minus x2. It's the exact same formula, just reversing the order. It still gets you the same answer. So for me, and y'all don't have to use this one, but I'm going to use this one. Because to me, it just, when I start plugging in numbers, I like putting the first thing first and the second thing second. Just because I found that I make fewer mistakes using this formula than I do with this formula. And there's no difference in the answer that if, and y'all don't have to write this part down, if you did this answer and this answer was negative 4/5, if you put it in this problem, the only difference is the negative, instead of being on the top, would be on the bottom. You get the exact same numbers, everything's the same, so that's the only thing that would happen different here, is it just moves where the positive and negative signs are. If both of these were negative, both of those would be positive. But what happens when you divide a negative by a negative? It makes it positive, right? So no matter what you do on this one, whether you use this formula or this formula, you get the exact same answer. So it's just whatever you want to do, but when we're working these out, I'm going to use this one because I like putting the first things first and the second things second. But that's just me. So, all right, so here's what we're going to do. Let's just show you some examples and just tell you, all right, find the slope. So we're going to do 7, negative 2, and then 5, 4. Okay, and this may seem like a very small, little trivial thing, but the classes that I've taught here at Sparkman, the classes I've taught at Calhoun, I see the same mistakes over and over. I've seen a lot of people miss these problems because they don't label these correctly. So for this one, this is the first point, so this is x1 and y1. So first point has to use the 1s, the second point has to use the 2s. And it's a small thing, but if you don't label it correctly, you're not going to get the correct answer. So take just a couple extra seconds, go back and label everything. And now we'll take those numbers and plug it into the formula up here. So your slope would be y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2. Again, I like that formula better because the first things go first, the second things go second. To me, it's a little bit less confusing when I'm going through that one. All right, if you're not good with negatives, don't fight against that. Use your calculators. Everybody's got a calculator that's here. So if we're doing these problems, take out your calculator and use it, because it's going to help you out on these. If you do negative 2 minus 4, that's a negative 6. If you do 7 minus 5, well, that's just 2. And if you have negative 6 over 2, you can simplify that down to negative 3 over 1. Or if they're asking you just to find the slope, if it's over 1, you can just put that as negative 3. Okay. And again, for these problems, when you're finding the slope of these problems, keep a calculator close by if you're not sure with your negative, or do it first and then check it with your calculator to make sure you got it. Because sometimes once you do enough of these, you'll be faster than doing it on the calculator if you just get in the practice of doing those. All right, number 2. Let's do 4, -3, and then -6 and -8. And again, it's a small thing, but it helps out a lot. The first point has to be both 1s, x1 and y1. Second point has to be both 2s, x2 and y2. Okay, so first things go first. So on the top, it's -3 for the y, minus. Now, and on these, I would say when you're plugging in the numbers to this formula, especially when you have negative numbers, put those numbers in parentheses. Same thing on the bottom. You have 4 minus -6. And if you'll get in the habit of putting negative numbers in parentheses when you plug them into an equation or plug them into anything, most of the time that's going to take care of all the issues that you run across when you go through these problems. The issues come when you don't put those in parentheses. You start losing things and it starts kind of messing some things up there. Alright, because first thing is, you've got minus and negative right here. So take that minus negative and make that a plus. Same thing on the bottom. Take that minus -6 and make that a plus 6. Okay, and from there, -3 plus 8 would be 5. 4 plus 6 would be 10. And for that one, kind of like the problem we had up before, you can divide this case both by 5. So for that slope, that would be 1/2. Here's where we have to be a little bit careful with some of these. 4 -5, and then 4 12. And again, it's a little thing, but go back and just label both of those, x1, y2, or x1, y1, and x2 and y2. First point's all 1s, second point's all 2s. Okay, and again, first points go first, second points go second. You just have to put the y's on top. So it's -5 minus 12, because neither one of those are negative. 4 minus 4. Okay, so you've got -17 over 0. And here's where the truth comes out for me. When I was in y'all's shoes taking this class in high school, I did not know the answer to that problem right there. Now, I could get 17 over 0, or in this case, -17 over 0. To get the next answer, I did not know it, and I just guessed. And guessing cost me a lot of points in high school on problems. And I think when I finally was in college, it finally hit me one day that, again, I had the answer to this problem in my hand every single time, because it's called a calculator. Take that fraction and put it in your calculator. It's -17 divided by 0. It says, hey, you can't do that. That's an error message, which for this one, you can say one of two things. That's either no slope, or some cases they'll call that undefined. And that's always going to be the case when 0 is on the bottom. So anytime you do a problem on these, and you do have 0 on the bottom, if you punch that, and again, I tell people, look, just if you're not real sure, use your calculator, because you've got one in your hands. Punch that number in the calculator and see what you get. If it says it's an error message, that means you don't get a real answer, which means this doesn't make any sense at all. So you can either say it's no slope or it's undefined. And I forget which one they give you the option. Because in the homework, they'll give you an option. You can click on one of those two. I forget which one it is. I can't remember right now which one. But it'd be one of those two things. Okay, now, if it had been 0 on top, if that had been 0 over 17, then that answer would be 0. So 0 on top, it's 0. If it's 0 on the bottom, it's undefined. And again, if you're not sure, just use your calculator. You've got that sitting in front of you. Make good use of the technology that's there. Don't be like me and realize that you had a great tool in your hand and just didn't use it because it's sitting in front of you. Okay, now let me show you. Here's the toughest problem you'll have to do with slope. Most of these are all pretty straightforward. Here's the toughest problem you'll have to do with slope, and it is doing slope, but at the same time, it's also getting us ready for some stuff that we have to do a little bit farther down the road. So we're going to talk about it now, so that when we get to it down the road, it won't be so bad. That you're going to have to find the slope of 2 fraction points. And somebody just got a cold chill, right? Because they don't like that. Okay, now, they shouldn't be that bad, because it's a problem when we see this. It shouldn't be as bad as it looks, because, again, do the little things. X1 and Y1, X2 and Y2. Okay, so on top, it is Y1, first thing first, minus Y2, 3/5. So we've got 2/5 minus 3/5. And then for the x's, it's 1/3 minus, that's a negative, so let's put that in parentheses, so it's minus a negative 2/3. Now, for the fraction problems, when you're doing these, you do these one piece at a time. That when you've got the fraction that's here, just ignore the bottom part and just work on the top part. 2/5 minus 3/5. Now, as long as they're common denominators, you just subtract. So it's 2/5 minus 3/5. That's going to be a negative 1/5. Okay, for the bottom part, when you go through that one, covering up the top part, it's 1/3 minus a negative. So first thing is, let's change that to a plus. So it's 1/3 plus 2/3. But what is 1/3 plus 2/3? That's 3/3, which will give you 1. So this is really negative 1/5 over 1. And if you take anything and put it over 1, it doesn't do anything at all to the problem. You can just, if it's over 1, you don't need that 1. So that would be just a negative 1/5. All right, now here's where we're going to do a little what if, just to kind of change the gears, because this is more the part I want to preview for some things that come up a little bit later. So let's say, because I want to show you that one, but at the same time I want to show you one here. Let's say that if we were doing this problem, where we got to the end right here, we had the negative 1/5 over 1. Let's just say that we had something like this, where we had negative 2/5, and that was over 4/3. So here's where you got to get in your Wayback Machine and go back in time. Anybody remember how to do that? And if you don't, it's okay, because once I show it to you, you'll be like, oh yeah, I remember doing that. Anybody? No? Maybe not? Okay. Alright, so here's what we've got to do. Let's take this problem you've got here and let's rewrite it. Let's take this problem that we've got right here and let's rewrite it where it's negative 2/5. Instead of saying it's over, that means divided by. Actually write out divided by 4/3. Because if you've got the big fraction bar here, that really means it's the top number divided by the bottom number. Alright, now does anybody remember how to change a division problem to multiplication? That's where you want to keep this first fraction the same, change that division to multiplication, and then flip that one, right? So keep, change, flip. Yeah, go keep, change, flip here. So first fraction you keep it, division you change it to multiplication, and you flip it upside down on the second problem. And once it's a multiplication problem, then you can just multiply straight across. You multiply your top numbers together, You got negative 2 times 3, which would be negative 6. And on the bottom, 5 times 4 is 20. So just multiply straight across to get the numbers. Now, somebody's like, well, what about that cross thing we used to do? Now, you can cross cancel, which is what we would do at the end, because on this one, if it's negative 6 over 20, you could divide them both by 2 and make that negative 3 over 10. We could have done the same thing here if you cross cancel, because you've got 2 and 4, you can divide these both by 2. It's negative. And that would make it negative 3 over 10. So that one, you've got two options. You can either multiply and cancel after you've done multiplication, or if you want to cross cancel, you can go back. And cross canceling just means you're dividing out the same number. So it's just a matter of, you do the same thing, it's just sometimes you do your division before you do your multiplication, but either one of those two is okay. Alright, does everybody remember doing that now? Most time it's been a while and people go, I don't like it. And then we show it, like, oh yeah, we used to do that all the time. Okay, now, just wanted to show you that one because you might have to do that once here. It's really more that as we get a little bit farther along in Chapter 2, and maybe even in the next chapter we're going to after that, you're going to see more of those fractions involved. So we just need to remind you that, okay, if you do have division like this, you want to go change flip so you can turn it into a multiplication problem. Okay, so just want to show you that one because that's going to pop up a little bit later on when we get to a couple other things. Alright, here we go. Here's the part that we previewed yesterday. The y equals mx plus b form. And that is slope-intercept form. And again, I know y'all have seen this before, so we're just going back and remind you that from what we said earlier, m, that is your slope, and the b value, that is the y-intercept. Now, again, here's where it helped me to kind of figure these things out. That again, slope is m, that's your movement from one point to another. And the b, somebody's like, all right, what are you going to do for the b? The b tells you where to begin. So B stands for begin here. The M stands for move this much to get to the next point. And I actually saw some other day, and I've thought this for years, and somebody's actually saying that there might be a move to this. Since you begin with the B value, some people actually start to move that B in front, which I thought all along they should do that. Instead of MX plus B form, it'll be B plus MX form. But I think for a lot of people, that's one of those you have to start that like in 6th grade or 7th grade, and then just kind of, get people used to it. It's a little, sometimes it's not worth the fight trying to change it now. Okay, so that's what we're going to. The M is the slope, yes, that's it. But that's more important. It's how you move to the next point. The B is the y-intercept, but more important than that B tells you where to begin. So you begin at this point on the y-axis because it's the y-intercept. And that gets you where you need to be there. Okay, so to get us going here, what we're going to do is we're going to write an equation. And we're going to do a quick, now we're not going to do like super detail. We're just going to do a quick sketch. Just to make sure we got an idea of what it looks like. And sketch the graph with a slope equal to negative 2/3. And a y-intercept equal to 1. Okay, again, slope is your m value, so your m is negative 2/3. The y-intercept, that's your b value, so your b value is 1. And if you want to put a positive 1, because it's really a positive 1, if you want to put a plus 1, you can put a plus 1 there if you want to. So for now, we'll just put the 1. Okay, and all we're going to do is take those two numbers and plug it into that equation. So y would equal negative 2/3 x plus 1. So there's your equation. Slope's always in front of x, the y-intercept's behind it. Okay, when you graph this one, again, we're not going to get super detailed with the graph. It doesn't have to be real big either. Okay, again, the very first thing you want to do is the b value. That tells you where to start, so that's your big N value. So on the y-axis, you go to that number and start right there. That's your first point. Okay, and to get the next part of it, the m tells you how to move to the next point. So the -2 means you're going down 2. If that was positive, we would go up 2, but because it's a negative number, we're going down 2. And for slope, you're always going to measure it to the right side. Now, unless they cut the graph off, where that's the only part of the graph you have. But most of these, you should be able to move, after you move up or down. If that's 3, then you move over 3 to get the next point there. The good thing about the online homework is, as soon as you put those 2 points, it will draw in that line for you. And actually, as you start to move your mouse or your cursor, you'll see that where it'll start drawing that line as you're moving that mouse around. So you're going to start at +1, go down 2 over 3, and that'll be the next point you've got there. Oh, let me show you this real quick. Again, this one we're going to just to make sure we've got it. Let's say this was y equals, let's just have you sketch it. Let's go with -4x plus, let's not make it negative, let's make it positive, sorry. Let's make it 4x minus 2. Okay, our b value is -2. Our m value is 4. And again, showing you this one because sometimes for y'all that's been a little while. Remember, if you're moving 4, you always have to move up and down and over. If it's a whole number, what number do you make so you can make it into a fraction? It's 4 over 1, right? So if you get a whole number for the slope, remember, if you're going to graph it, it's not just moving 4. You've got to turn it into a fraction. So you're going up 4 and then over 1 for a problem like that. Okay, so there's your y-axis. So for that one, you're going to begin at -2, which would be right there. And again, for the m value, because sometimes people get on when they're working on these, they'll just go up 4 and put a dot there, and then they draw the line. But remember, if you're doing slope, it's got to be a fraction. It's got to be rise over run. So if there's not a bottom part of the fraction, just put it over 1 every single time. So from here, go up 1, 2, 3, 4 over 1. Connect your dots, and then you're good to go. So again, if slope isn't a fraction, just make sure that if it's not a fraction, just put it over 1, and that'll make it a fraction every single time. Okay, so we've got the slope formula, how to get the slope, for the y's, y1 minus y2, x1 minus x2. Here's just your basic graphs, doing y equals mx plus b. And remember, there are a couple of special cases when you're going through these. So if you have a positive slope, the one thing about slopes with a positive, or anything about the graph of a line that has a positive slope, they all have one thing in common. The right side will always point up. So that is the one thing it doesn't. Now, it may be a little steeper than some of the other ones, but the one thing you can do is the right side of the graph will always point somewhere in the up direction. For negative slope, it's the opposite. That the right side is pointing down. Okay, again, that's things y'all have seen before, so we'll go over those. And there's always those two trick questions. That you get the problems that don't have any tilt, that they're either vertical or they're horizontal. And because those are special cases, they've got a special thing that we're looking at for this one. And again, I'm going to tell you what I learned, and I'll tell you what somebody told me a few years ago when we were going through this one, how they remembered it. And I didn't worry about, in high school, again, kind of going back and thinking about the mistakes on this one. You don't have to memorize both of them, and pick one. And for me, the one I wound up picking was, here's the one connection I made. And it may not make sense to you, but I'll show you. Horizontal's got a Z, right? And we know back here when we were talking about slope that if you're, the two special cases we had was it's either 0 or it's undefined. So what I figured out for this one was, if this has got a 0, or Z for horizontal, that also means that's a 0 slope. And if I memorize this one, that horizontal lines had a 0 slope, vertical lines had, the other line had to be the other way. So if it's vertical, this is going to be undefined. Or sometimes they call it no slope. And somebody told me a different way about this when they said, well, my teacher, and they were telling me this, they said, my teacher back then told me it was like rolling the ball on these things. You know, if you roll the ball on this part, it rolls uphill. So if it's going up, that means it's positive. If you roll the ball on this one, it's going to roll downhill, so that's negative. And I said, what about these two? I said, well, how do I do this? They said, well, can you roll the ball on a vertical wall? Can right now, unless you've got one of those little sticky hand, spider things where it just falls down the wall. But if you just take a regular ball and try to roll it on a vertical wall, it's just going to bounce off of it. So if it doesn't stick to the wall, it doesn't roll. If it doesn't roll, then it has no slope. And I said this one, it doesn't go up, it doesn't go down, it just stays flat. So there's no tilt to it. So since there's no tilt, it doesn't go up, it doesn't go down, it stays flat. So it's just 0. So whatever you can do to think of it. And again, you don't have to memorize both. Just memorize one and know that the other one is the other answer. And then you'll be okay. Alright, now, since these two are special lines, they also have a special equation. Alright, and that special equation for this one is it's going to be y equals just some number. So when you do this one, for horizontal lines, you're going to have an equation. Instead of y equals mx plus b, there is no y equals mx plus b form for horizontal and vertical lines. Every single one of those, it's just y equals 2. Or y equals -4. And all it's going to be is you're just going to tell me where this thing crosses the y-axis, and that's going to be the number you're going to put here. And what I tried to hammer home last year with people that do this, if it doesn't have any tilt, because this one, these two lines, they're going up and down, they're also going left and right. This one, it only goes one direction. It's just horizontal. This one is just vertical. There's no horizontal vertical tilt. If it only goes one direction, you only use one number. Alright, the special equation for vertical lines. Well, if this one's y equal, guess what vertical is going to be? It's going to be the other one, right? It's going to be x equals. Just x equals some number. And again, that some number is going to be the number where it crosses the x-axis. So it's going to be x equals, 3 or x equals -1 or something like that. So both of those two, and if they ask you to put it in y equals mx plus b form, that's it. It's just y equals some number if it's horizontal. If it's x equals, that means it's going to have to be a vertical line. So those two, they have their own special little equation because they're special lines because they don't have any tilt to them. They're just a one-way line. They're either vertical or they're horizontal. You know, when you do positive and negative, they have tilts to them, so you're going a little bit up and a little bit over at the same time. This one is just one or the other. Okay, and then the last thing we got to do, just for a little bit of practice on these. I don't know if put would be the best option to say there, but we're going to put the equation in y equals mx plus b form. We're going to do two of these and then we'll be done. And these aren't too bad because you're just going to move some stuff around for the most part. So we got 3x minus 4y equals 12. Now, here's why we practiced on that first test. And we'll go back over that here in just a second. Here's why we practiced on that first test of solving an equation for a certain variable. This one, you've got to get the y by itself. So to get the y by itself, you've got to get rid of this 3x. So since that's a positive 3x, the first thing you want to do is subtract 3x from both sides. And y equals mx plus b form, they put the x first, so we'll put that x value first. So you got negative 4y equals negative 3x plus 12. To get the y by itself, you've got negative 4 times y, so we're going to divide everything by negative 4. That'll cancel. Okay, for the negative 3 over negative 4, those two negatives will cancel and make it a positive. 12 divided by negative 4 is a negative 3. And there you go. There you are in y equals mx plus b form. And anytime it starts off like this, where you've got x's and y's on the same time, it's always the same two steps. You're going to add or subtract this number away, and then you're going to divide by whatever number's with the y. So if they ask you to work that one every single time, it's the exact same two steps every time. Add or subtract away the x, divide by the number with the y every single time on those. Alright, one more, and we're done. And this was a question straight off the first test. You know, we had straight out of Compton with the movie, though this one's straight out of test 1. So, yeah, I know that's bad, but it's okay. Gotta get you to laugh somehow. Even if it's a bad joke, you still gotta laugh. Okay, alright, x over 5 minus y over 10 equals 2. Now, here's where on the test, some people did the right thing, but just missed one little thing up. So you'll see it here in a second when I give the test back, that you get some partial credit. 5 and 10. If you start counting by 5s and 10s, as they get bigger, they're going to have a 10 in common, right? Now, also would have 20, they also have 30, but the first number they have in common would be 10. So, and a lot of people did this. You're going to take everything here and multiply it by 10. So this x over 5, you're going to multiply it by 10. Minus the 10, we're going to do y over 10. Equals, and then 2 times 10. Now, some people forgot to multiply this number on the right side by 10. And again, that was where showing the work helped a lot of people out because I called it, you lost 1 or 2 points off that problem. But we're here. A lot of people multiplied everything. But remember, for this one, if you multiply by 10, this is really like 10 over 1. So even though you're multiplying it, you're dividing 5 into 10, that should go 2 times. Some people are multiplying the 10 and 5 together to get 50. Some people multiply 10 and 10 to get 100 here. But remember, if you're multiplying 10 times y divided by 10, it's 10 divided by 10. So that's just a 1y. And then 2 times 10 is 20. So remember, that is division. So it's 10 times x divided by 5. So we'll do 10 divided by 5. So those are canceled and just make it 2 there. Somebody's going, oh. Right? Now somebody's looking at it going, that's what I did wrong. Alright, and then from here, now we're back to the same thing we did before, because the fractions are gone. Get rid of the x. And it's negative 1 with the y, so then go back and divide everything by negative 1. So that's a y equals those two negatives makes that a positive. Positive and negative there makes that a